Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show, Commercial Real Estate Secrets. Today, we have a special guest, Jonathan Wong. He is the partner of Renovo Endodontic Studio, graduated from dental school in 2008, residency in 2010, and they currently have 8 locations in the Chicago area. They've got a focus on horizontal growth and a willingness to take advantage of the opportunities as they come along with new locations. So, Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. How's it going, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. So you obviously have a very busy schedule. I know right now you're commuting in between locations.
I am, yes.
Trying to take care of business. So I appreciate
Yeah.
it. So yeah, it's cool, man. What part of the country did you grow up in, and where'd you go to school?
I grew up in the Midwest, Chicagoland area, suburbs of Chicago. I went to undergrad in University of Illinois, Champaign. I went to dental school at University of Illinois, residency at University of Illinois. So I have
Nice. So you like the Illinois area?
Yes and no. I just never had the courage to move out. I mean, the sensible side of me said that I never wanted to pay out of state tuition.
Oh yeah. Well, I can't fault you for that.
Yeah.
Tuition is insane as it is. So
Of course.
when did you decide that you wanted to get into dentistry? Did you dabble in any other things before you made up your mind?
I was actually on the pre-med physicians track my entire undergraduate tenure. I actually didn't know that I wanted to be a dentist until less than 6 months before I stepped into my first classroom. And the way that happened was because having conservative Asian parents, I didn't get the courage to tell my parents that I didn't want to go into medical school, which I had already been accepted and ready to go, until maybe about a couple months before I was actually supposed to pack up my stuff and go. So you can imagine telling that to conservative Asian parents, that's pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
But also when asked the follow-up question of, well, what's your plan B? And you don't have an answer, that's even worse. So it was fate that I kind of fell into dentistry. You know, I moved out of my parents' house because I didn't want to hear all the chirping in my ear. Started working random jobs, working in the nightclubs even. I met somebody whose husband was a dentist, and he was the one that suggested, "Hey, why don't you give dentistry a try?" I had already got into medical school, so I had taken the MCAT already. And my first reaction was, no, that's gross. I don't want to look in people's mouths. Why would I was like, why would I want to do that, right? And he's like, why don't you come to the office and shadow me for a little bit? You got nothing else to do. I said, sure, fine. And I did that. And, ironically enough, surprisingly enough, I said, this isn't that bad. Maybe I'll try doing this. I took the DAT, applied, and within 6 months, I was in dental school.
Wow, nice. And prior to that, did you ever try starting your own businesses or do anything like sort of entrepreneurial at a younger age? Because obviously, locations.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I've never had any aspirations to be an entrepreneur. The only thing that I knew that was constant for me was what I like to call immigrant mentality, right? I am no immigrant. I'm a 4th generation Chinese American, right? But I have a very, very immigrant mentality, which is basically, for those who don't know, it's I will do what others are unwilling or can't do. And basically, entrepreneurs in my mind, before I became one, they're usually work smarter, not harder types of people. And I've historically been if you work harder, if you outwork anybody, you will achieve success regardless. So, and I also have a strong sense of common sense. So,
sorry, a strong what?
Things combine. A strong sense of common sense.
Mm.
When I got in 2010 and I started my practice, to give a little background, I was commuting amongst 13 different offices, making good money, but I didn't want to do the commute. So when everybody said that they didn't have a job because of the recession, it was slow, there wasn't enough patients, I took a chance and I planted my flag, bought my first piece of commercial real estate. If I must be completely honest, I didn't think everything through. I just have always historically been, this is what I want. I'm going to do it. And I don't know how it's going to happen. I'm going to make it work.
Kind of like a ready, fire, aim approach.
Yeah, pretty much. But I was fortunate enough and lucky enough to have chosen my first location very well, because that's our best office. And that's a consequence of never leaving the state. You know, I'm very familiar with where I practice. You know, nobody has any claim to any territories, but if there's anything that was as close to that as possible, it would be me.
Yeah,
you know,
so
I
let's
grew
talk
up
about
where
that.
I worked.
Yeah, let's talk about that,
Yeah,
because you know, obviously this show is about real estate. You know, we like getting the entrepreneurial stories and the adventures, but I think that's cool that you talked about the location, the selection, and how much that played into your success, because, you know, there's just so many times a business, you know, they quote, what is that, Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. And it's like, that's just because it's in a movie doesn't make it true, right? There's so much that goes into site selection. Yes. So what was it about this location that A, drew you to it and gave you enough conviction to sign it? And in hindsight, made it a good deal?
Yeah, it just so happens that for my particular situation, it just so happens that I grew up in the suburb right next door, number one. The first office that our location is at, compared to any other suburb. So it's not the largest suburb of Chicago, but it's got the largest daytime population. That's important, right? When you're looking and doing some research, you can't just look at, there's this many people here, right? Because a lot of people, especially in the dental world, they are willing to go to their dentist when it's convenient for work. So when you have a daytime population that's double than what is published, that tells you that there's lots of businesses in the suburb that I'm in. So that was the single biggest driving factor: convenience. I knew the area, largest daytime population. It just so happens that there were three other specialists like myself, they were long in the tooth, if you will say. You know what I mean? I don't want to be practicing next, if I can help it anyways. I don't want to be practicing next to somebody who's got another 30 years left to work, just like me. That's part of the working smarter, not harder, I attempted to integrate myself into one of those practices that didn't work out. And so I said, okay, I'll do my own. So that's where that came into. And I've been hitting the ground running ever since. I mean, my first 15 months was actually quite impressive for a startup. Like, it's like no patience, no nothing. From zero reputation to 15 months, collections was right around $1 million. So
wow, yeah, that's very fast growth. And where did it stabilize at, or is it still growing?
It's still growing. I actually just doubled the practice a couple of years ago. Less than a couple, like more than one. Yeah, there was a physician that was next to us. I bought his unit and I basically doubled the size of mine. So that's what I meant by horizontal growth.
Okay, and so you knew by being local to that area that the daytime traffic was just insane. What would you classify the space as? Is it a retail space? Is it an office space? I mean, is it highly visible off the main road?
It is an office condo that does not have street visibility. But that is not required for a dental specialist, right? As opposed to a general dentist, which street visibility, foot traffic is of more importance. Because it's simply numbers. There's way more general dentists than specialists.
Okay. And can you explain for everybody listening what your specialty is exactly?
I am an endodontist, which is a root canal specialist. So we do root canals as our bread and butter. Extractions, surgeries involving failing root canals, dental implants, that kind of thing.
Okay. So when people are looking to get something that specific, they're searching it out anyways, is what you're saying?
Correct. Well, our business philosophy is a little bit different. The traditional sense of a general dentist and specialist relationship is specialists usually have to woo the general dentist because they're the main source of referral, right? When I opened in 2010 with the practice, I went into what I call survival mode. I mean, I know what works, right? I basically sat down and I said, okay, I picked the location. I have my piece of real estate. Nobody can tell me what to do, when to do it. That's very key when you're starting your own thing, because you don't want to have added stress of restrictions by a landlord, right? But I sat down and I put myself in the shoes of a patient, and I said, okay, what is going to deter me from coming to a particular specialist, right? And that is, you can go right down the line. Availability. I was available 7 days a week at the time. Insurance. I took every insurance. I still take every insurance. Hours, right? It's location. Well, I didn't have the ability to have multiple locations, but now I do. I have a location in every major county now in Chicago. So, because the reason why I call it survival mode is because I can't just walk into a general dentist and say, hey, use me. I'm the new kid on the block. I'm better than the guy that you've been using for 30 years. Just not going to happen, right? So instead, my angle was, I'm going to come in, I'm going to say, hey, I may not be your first, second, or third choice, but I also know that your first, second, and third choice, they're going to have to go on vacation sometime. And when they do, I'll be here. So having your own piece of real estate to close the loop on the real estate, it reduces a lot of the stressors, because you're paying rent anyways. So you might as well get some equity out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we advocate for both, right? Like, we don't have a hard stance that we say, hey, you should always buy your location, or hey, you should always rent it. Like, our approach is generally, it's very situational, because there's so many factors that go into it. Like if all things, first of all, like, we always advocate for get the best location, get the best location that you can. And then if you have to buy it or if you have to rent it, that's when you figure out how to make it work. But don't compromise the location based on your personal preferences, because there's just not enough conviction either way to say always rent or always buy. So I agree with that. And then there's other things like capital constraints. When you buy your location, that's less money that you have to grow your business, which in your case, you're growing your number of locations, like that takes some capital, right?
And I mean, TI money is huge for renters, right?
Yeah.
I put in a lot of my own money, right? So you have to be able to take on a certain amount of risk to do so. So you're exactly right. I mean, you shouldn't really be restricted to, I'm going to buy, I have to own, because the reality is, and I'm sure it's no different where you're at or anywhere for that matter, the availability, the inventory for condos or properties to purchase is way, way, way less than for properties to lease, right? And usually it's a little bit less desirable. And if you're trying to buy something that's in the desirables, you're basically not just buying a unit. A lot of times you have to buy the whole building, and people just simply don't have that money.
Right. You gotta have the confidence that you can fill it, or you got to buy it with existing tenants, and then that's going to affect the price of the building. If you buy it in a fully leased building, except for the spot that you're going to take, you're going to be paying somewhat of a premium for that. So it's a difficult thing to do. It's like people read on a billboard, don't throw your money away renting. And they think that applies to their business and to everything. But there's a lot more factors than just that.
So I will say, a word on the commercial real estate, because this is the focus of your podcast. Some things that I have learned is, if you can own, right?
Yeah.
For me, I would love to have a standalone building. None of mine are standalone buildings. They are all commercial condo units. There are pros and cons to both, right? If you're standalone, you have basically, it's another house. There's more maintenance that you have to take on. Commercial condos, there's less maintenance, but there's assessments, and depending on where you're at, sometimes those assessments may be high. But if at all costs, if you can avoid, from what I've learned, try to own your unit outright and don't take a percentage of the entirety.
Yeah, that's good. Sense. That's good. Especially because I can imagine those types of places would have a lot of rules.
A lot of rules, a lot of red tape. It's like it defeats the purpose of owning if you have to still rely on your suite mates to do anything. Because you don't actually own your property; you own a percentage of the building. It just to me, it defeats the purpose of owning your own unit.
Yeah. So, you got your first location, and you said, "Hey, I'm the guy who's always going to be here whenever they're on vacation, come to me. That seemed to work pretty well. You grew it to $1 million in revenue from 0 to $1 million in 15 months. How long did it take before? I'm guessing at some point you became their primary referral, like their primary place to refer patients.
Yeah. I mean, like anything in medicine and dental, right? Your success is in business. What we're talking from a business angle now only, right? Your success is, in my opinion, is more predicated on your personality than your skills.
Yeah.
Now, if you had high skills, high efficiency, you work fast. That's what I mean by efficiency. And you have the personality to close the deal, no one's going to touch you, right? And that's kind of where, I have that confidence in myself, the self-confidence. Like, I don't really care what's going on around me. I don't care the aspects, the dental works. You can put one right around me. Every single one of them doesn't matter to me. Because at the end of the day, one person can only do so much. And, the personality in business is what closes the deal. Almost.
Yeah, it's they did that study a while ago about medical malpractice, and there was hardly any correlation between suing the doctor and the performance or the outcome of the surgery. And there's a high correlation between the friendliness of the doctor and how well the patient liked it. And essentially, you got a friendly doctor that totally screwed you up, right? And totally messed up the practice. But if you like them as a person, you're not going to sue them.
People don't sue who they like.
Yeah.
So just don't give them a reason to not like you.
Have you ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by, I think it was Andrew Carnegie?
I have not, but I'll put it on my list.
It's a really good book. I mean, it sounds like you may already do some of that. But I swear, my wife, it's like she could have wrote the book. I mean, she does all this stuff naturally on her own, and she gets along so well with people. She's a physician assistant. And for me, I had to learn it. I really had to learn it. I was very introverted and had to force myself to become extroverted, to become focused on other people, because I was very selfish, to be honest. And I had to really, the book really helped me think in terms of other people and put myself in their shoes. And that helps. I mean, when I was doing sales back when I owned the gyms, it was very, very helpful, right?
Of course.
It's not saying to be insincere by any means. You actually, you switch your mindset, right? You actually start caring more about people. And it's not something that that you have to fake it, right? It's not something that's unethical, but it's actually caring more about people, and that helps your business. So it's funny how it works. So all right, how long? That strategy seemed to work really well. How long until you were able to open up your second location, and what was that like?
So for a while, I was opening one practice, on pace to opening around one practice a year. And for the first 6 or 7 years, I was actually more than that. I was increasing revenue by at least $1 million every year.
Nice.
So it was almost on pace to be like one practice per year, because I got used to doing it. I was like, when I was telling you about, I was sitting down and writing down all the deterrents for a particular patient. That's basically me offering a promise to referring doctors and to the community at large. Well, I grew a little faster than I thought I would, because I was going based on what I've known from mentors and other people who have tried doing startups. So startups in dentistry tend to be more difficult, right? And you generally realize a loss in the first year or two before you start getting profit. I did the opposite. So I was growing a lot faster than I anticipated. And my first practice is not where I bought my first house. It was probably 45 minutes away or so.
Oh, wow.
So my second location was a business play, because my first 4 offices are all at highway intersections. So there's something to be said about locations. So my first 3 locations are exactly, for my first one is 18.1 miles going one way, and the other one is 17.8 miles going the other. So it's kind of like a triangle, like an equilateral triangle. Nice. So it's like the way I pick my locations is kind of like cell phone towers.
Okay.
Right. So when the signal starts getting weak, then you put up another one. so they can feed off of each other. That's how. So each startup hasn't really been a startup in the sense of like the first one. The first one was like the true startup. And even though I've had de novos before, they were just close enough where I can feed them from the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So are you saying that you had more than enough business to feed the first one, that you could send some overflow to the second and third ones?
Of course, yes. So a lot
Yeah.
of my practice is share patients and referring doctors. We chose it that way because you don't want to put a practice that's, there are outliers, like the one that I was telling you before. The one that I'm actually commuting to is a little bit farther out, but the demographic is such that you can't lose, right? Because I'm kind of going to a demographic that most people don't want to go to. That's exactly what I mean by immigrant mentality. Do what others are unwilling to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It sounds like the combination of working smart and working hard is what's helped you grow so fast.
Yeah, I'm getting better at the smarter part. I've always had the hard part down, working hard part down. I'm getting a lot better at working smarter over time.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So those were second and third locations, kind of made an equilateral triangle. And then how long did it take you? How long was in between the second and the third one? And how long did it take you before you stabilized and started growing again?
So I got the first one, and then not 2 years after that, I had the second one, and then not even a year after that, I had the third one. So I'm like I had told you before, I'm a little less than traditional. Like, people generally don't open offices for associates that haven't even arrived yet, associate doctors, but at the point it was kind of like, well, nobody wants to start a job and build a practice for somebody else, right? I was lucky enough to have enough overflow where I say, hey, if you give me a day or two at the startup practice, I will make sure that you feast the other 3 days, right? And the intent is you're going to be feasting the entire 5 days. And to show that I'm in it with you, I will do the same, right? Okay. So that's another component of being an owner. You have to understand where your help is coming from and how to maximize and motivate them. If you sit back and, like, Scrooge McDuck, and sit on your mountain of money and you let your minions work for you, they're not going to be motivated. Whereas me, I work full time just like everybody else. I'm in the trenches, and I can, I'm still the most productive doctor company wide. Wow. Not because, I'm, and this is where I differ in opinion to some other people who are trying to build multi-location DSOs, if you will. They say that you should try to get out of the mode of being the highest producer, right? Well, like, the reason for that of getting out of the highest producer mode is so that you can spend more time working on your business and not in your business, right? From my perspective, I am working in my business, but I'm working just as hard on my business because now I have partners, minority partners, but I also have a team that I trust, which allows me to continue to work. Because at the end of the day, if you're just talking straight numbers, back to what I was talking to you before, when we were getting to know each other, part of the reason why I haven't sold the business is because it's hard to walk away from, collecting a few $1 million a year, and personally, but also realizing, like, somewhere on the order of 120% compensation. Who wants to walk away from that and trade that in for being a 40% employee? Who wants to do that? Nobody. Right? So that's what I said. Like, at the end of the day, there's always opportunity. And also at the end of the day, I am a dentist. I'm a clinician first, right? But I'm also aware. I have awareness. I'm not opening locations because I'm a good dentist. I'm opening locations because I seem to be pretty good at what I'm doing, and I'm trying to allow the people who are with me on my team to benefit as well. Associate doctors, employees, I almost feel like I'm sort of a mini economy stimulator, if you will.
Well, it's good because everybody's got to have a niche, right?
Of course, yes.
So if you don't have a niche, then you're not gonna have a long lifespan. And it sounds like that's your niche, is getting in the trenches. Like, it's counter to what a lot of DSOs prescribe or do.
Yep.
And so that could help you on your growth. I mean, it seems like at some point you might have to stop working as much, chair side, but you might have a long road till that. I mean, are you, from what it sounds like, just hearing that story, sounds like if you're spending a lot of time like actually working in the business and on the business, sounds like you're doubling your workload. Do you have 80-hour weeks right now? I mean, what's that like?
No, I work 5 days a week. I still work 5 days a week. Because of personal circumstance, I recently started working 6 days a week, but that's not because it's not a necessity of need. It just so happens that I have a little bit more time now. But that's where becoming an efficient clinician comes into play, right? Mm-hmm. I work very hard on my dental skills. I am not just a business owner who wants to maximize profit and benefit off the hard work of others. I work just as hard, if not harder, than everybody else. In fact, I am so confident in myself that I will bet any amount of money that nobody works harder than I do. Now, let's say that again. I will bet any amount of money that nobody works harder than I do. I never said that there are people that don't work just as hard, right? But I have yet to find somebody who works harder. You know what I mean? So this is the mentality that I bring to my business, in that, if you're not really paying attention to the wording to what I'm saying, you need to have this type of, what do you call it? Lion mentality, I call it, right? Mamba mentality, ode to Kobe, right? You have to be able to, to kill everybody, you know what I mean? But when I say that, you have to do that respectfully. So I've never said I was the best or better. I just said, find somebody who will work harder than me. You won't find that person.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
And that's what I call confidence and not cocky. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, a lot of people get those mixed up. Confidence is knowing that you're good at some things and better at some things than other people. Cockiness is thinking you're better at everything than everybody.
That is correct. Yep. That is correct. Yeah.
All right. So, and then it sounds like that strategy is the one you applied, and it continued to work for you until you grew to your the amount of locations you have now. So what's on the horizon for 2021? What are your growth plans, and how do you plan on doing that?
We're actually in the process of closing another 2 locations, so that will go from 8 to 10. Another deal just came across the table. That probably would not add location, but it may be more of an acquisition to integrate into an existing location if it all works out. But we really want to do focus on horizontal growth if we can help it. The limiting factor always will and always has been and always will be getting the doctors. And don't be mistaken that everybody thinks that when they say, oh, so and so has so many locations, they must be doing so awesome, right? That's not true, right? That's not necessarily true, right? Would you rather have 10 offices, each one of them making $500,000 or less, right? Which is what, $5 million? Or would you rather have one location that does 12 million? Right. I'd rather have the one.
Less headache.
You know what I mean?
It's less headache.
Right. Too. It's a lot less headache. It's the greatest increaser of EBITDA to location. So people are mistaken. I've also heard some mentors of mine, which I subscribe to, you should never open another location because you're not busy enough at the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will say all of my locations are full-time locations. So they're not part-time locations. I mean, they can accommodate more doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at minimum, they all have to be full-time locations.
So what advice do you have for anybody listening in if they want to, they want to start up their own business, or they want to start up their own endodontic studio, or even just dentist, location?
I mean, it takes a certain somebody. I have plenty of colleagues that make plenty of money, and they are very comfortable being associate doctors. They just don't want to own. They don't want to have the responsibility, right? Business ownership in the dental world is very much a higher risk, higher reward type of thing, right? There's the best example that I can give you is when I was an associate doctor, I was commonly regarded as one of the most liked doctors in whatever office I was. I remember one of the offices, they used to call me one of the girls. You know what I mean? That's how cool I was, right? But then once you cross over the line into ownership, there are certain boundaries that you have to set for yourself, and no matter how hard you try, you can't be one of the girls anymore.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Or one of the boys, right? Because there's hard decisions that you have to make, and it's high responsibility. But you know, if you work hard enough and you're smart enough, that responsibility translates into a higher reward. You know, like it's less about making the money for me. It's more about independence, right? I'm fortunate enough to make enough money, um, more than enough that I'll need to live in my daily life, right? Everything else is just things that I will never see until I'm ready to cash in. And that's not going to be happening anytime soon. So why even worry about it, right? All I know right now is I can work comfortably. I have sound peace of mind. I don't have to answer to anybody, you know, like it's a good feeling to know that if I wanted to, I could go to work in my underwear if I wanted to. I mean, it doesn't mean that patients will come, but I could, you know, and not get in trouble. You know what I mean?
Total freedom, right?
Total freedom. And for me anyways, there's no price that you can put on that. Now, that is not to say that ownership is for everybody. You know what I mean? Like I just mentioned the word independence. The reason why we have such low turnover in terms of our doctors is because we give them a lot of independence. I don't nickel and dime them. I pay them, you know, comparatively close to max dollar, right? And you know, I basically say, this is what you're going to get. There's not much room to go up from here. I don't even know you that well. The number one rule is just don't mess up, right? And I don't impose techniques on anybody. You have to do it this way. You have to do this. No, you don't have to. You do whatever you want. Just don't mess up, right? And when I say don't mess up, that doesn't mean don't mess up a case. You know, when I say I expect perfection, I don't expect perfection I'm not even a perfect clinician. What I mean by perfection is you need to handle whatever situations with perfection. You know what I mean? So I give them a very comfortable place to live, and to the point where they don't ever want to leave. Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the other advantage. Speaking of now that I have it on the mind, that's another advantage of having multiple locations. When I told you that one of the things that I did was try to eliminate all the deterrents for the consumer, right? We're talking business now, right? You're not a patient. You're not only are you a patient, you are also a consumer now, right? One of them is to take insurance. Well, the reason why a lot of dentists, a lot of dental specialists particularly don't take insurance is because the reimbursement is much lower usually than your what they call UCR, usual and customary fee, right? Okay. The advantage of having multiple locations, multiple doctors, multiple zip codes, geographic coverage in terms of mileage, you know, is you can basically use that as leverage with the insurance companies. So a lot of while I was putting my nose to the grindstone when I was in my younger practicing career, I was accepting any fee that I could get in survival mode. That's what I meant by survival mode. Those same insurances are now starting to pay dividends because my reimbursement is very, very close to my colleagues' non-insurance fee. Right? So when you tell a patient, hey, would you rather spend, I don't know, $1,400 for a root canal, or do you want to spend $200? Right? But I'm going to get somewhere close to $1,200. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't matter if the fee for service doctor is the best doctor on earth. Money talks, right? And people don't want to pay more than, you know, and if you can close the deal by making your work as good as the next person you won't find better, then what reason does anybody have not to come here?
Oh yeah.
The answer is so the answer is none. So it's like, I don't try to advertise myself as better than anybody else. I take the opportunities that are given to me, either geographically in terms of choosing locations or individually as patients. You know, I go in with the mentality when I treat my patients, I may not be the first endodontist you've ever seen, but I'm damn sure going to try to be the last. Right? So I worked in the city. I got people coming out here to seek me out after close to 10 years. I'm like, you remember me? You know, and they do. And that's a good feeling, you know?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, especially because in your line of work, you don't have that many reoccurring, right? Like a lot of times, like the root canal, I mean, that could
Yeah.
be once in
Yeah.
a
That's
lifetime
the other,
thing.
right. So that's, I mean, even though we do high collections procedures, right? We're like SEM, right? Endodontists are like SEM. It's like pay per click. Once you stop paying, they go away, right? General dentists, which require follow up, you get a big patient base. That's like SEO, right? Once you build it up, it'll take a lot more to tear it down, right? If we stop hunting, if you will, right? There will be no food. You know, we don't have a refrigerator.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
No, it's good. And I liked what you said about the business owner earlier, because it's high reward. Everybody looks at the reward, everybody looks at the freedom, but it's high risk. And a lot of people fail to either understand that or fail to talk about that. You know, it's like, I think Mark Cuban says, when you become an entrepreneur, you're giving up your 40-hour-a-week job so that you can work 80 hours a week.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, there's a reason why, CEOs and founders are making 100 times, 150 times more than the employees in some cases. Well, it's because there was a long period of time where they risked everything. They risked all their time for no guaranteed return. It risked capital out of pocket, and the employees always got a guarantee. They traded their time for money. There's never any risk on their part. So sometimes those companies that you don't make it, right? Sometimes they fail. A lot of times, more often than not, companies fail. And so that's why there's a big upside. And so if you can't stomach it,
go ahead.
You can't stomach that, and you have a high need for security. I mean, there's 6 human needs, right? According to Tony Robbins, one of those is security. If you got a really high need for security, that's one of your top needs. Probably not a good idea to be a business owner or an entrepreneur where you're going to be taking a lot of risks all the time.
Right. So the way we build our business mantra is, you can come here, you will always be working as a doctor or an employee. If you come here, you will always be working. There will always be something to do, as opposed to your solo practitioner, when a lot of times when the boss is on vacation, you're also on vacation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very stable, right? When you're asking help, right? There's 2 things that they want, right? There's either stability, right? And when I say stability, that usually means hours and income, right? And the second thing is convenience. If you could have both, that's what we try to provide. But there will be a time sometimes where you can only have one, right? So I go forth and I ask every one of my doctors and my employees, there will come a time when you can't have both. And when that time comes, I want to hear it from you. Which one do you prefer to have? I already know the answer, right? It's stability and income. So I use that as leverage for when the times get a little rough, if you know what I mean. Right?
Yeah.
And that gives them that little extra bit of motivation to say, hey, I'm right there with you. I'm not doing this on purpose. Let's just get through this rough patch, whatever it may be. Right. And I'll try to implement I'll do whatever it takes I need to get the convenience back for you, kind of thing. Yeah. That's a lot of work.
That's great.
It's a lot of work.
I bet. I bet. Well, yeah, cool. So, I mean, it's been really great. What's a great way, if somebody wants to contact you, they got more questions about what you do or anything like that, I mean, what's the best place to reach out?
Probably the website is the best thing for us, because it's got all of our information, personal profiles, and even ways to reach the doctors. That is going to be info@renovoendo.com. That's RENOVOENDO.com.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And I'll write that down in the show notes for everybody listening, so they can just click on that. But hey, man, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to see how you guys are doing in the future.
Absolutely, we'll be here.
Yeah. All right,
man. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.